afternoon's economic forecast presentation. His former colleague from the Bank of Canada Tiff Mlam entered with a concerned expression. "You've seen the tweets," Mlam asked. "I have," Carney replied, not looking up from his notes. "This isn't just about policy disagreements. Mark, his team is making it personal." Carney finally glanced up. "The figures speak for themselves. I won't be drawn into a Twitter war with the President of the United States." The afternoon session was structured differently. A series of presentations followed by a moderated discussion. The ballroom had been reconfigured with a podium and larger screens to display economic projections. Security was noticeably tighter, with Canadian RCMP officers positioned discreetly throughout the venue. Carney's presentation came first. With methodical precision, he outlined the economic case for climate action, displaying graphs that showed the correlation between environmental regulations and market growth in various countries. The data consistently shows that economies with stronger environmental frameworks demonstrate greater resilience during downturns, Carney explained, pointing to comparative recovery rates after the 2020 global recession. When it was Trump's turn at the podium, he deviated from his prepared remarks almost immediately. "These pretty charts and fancy theories sound nice in places like this," Trump began, gesturing around the ornate ballroom. "But let me tell you what's really happening. American energy independence, which my administration achieved, by the way, is being threatened by these global climate schemes." The atmosphere in the room tensed as Trump continued, his voice growing louder. "And we have so-called experts like Mark Carney who couldn't wait to leave Canada for a bigger job, telling hardworking people they need to pay more for everything because of some models that keep getting it wrong." Carney's expression remained neutral, though a colleague beside him whispered something that made him shake his head slightly. The fact, as Trump continued, now fully abandoning his teleprompter, "These international bankers have been pushing policies that weaken our economies, while China keeps building coal plants." Carney's been wrong before. His Brexit predictions were a disaster, and he's wrong now. The moderator attempted to redirect the conversation, but Trump had built momentum. "You know, I respect Canada, beautiful country, but they let this guy run their central bank. Then he jumped ship to England, and now he's back telling everyone how to spend their money on climate fantasies." The live stream comments section exploded with activity. Financial reporters began filing urgent updates in the press section. Journalists exchanged wide-eyed glances at the unprecedented attack. When the moderator finally regained control, she turned to Carney. "Mr. Carney, would you like to respond to these characterizations of your work?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the composed economist known for his measured responses and diplomatic approach. For several seconds, Carney simply looked at his notes, organizing his thoughts. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady. "I believe we can disagree on policy without questioning each other's motives or patriotism." He paused, looking directly at Trump. "For the first time, public service is just that, service, whether at the Bank of Canada, where I had the honor of helping navigate our economy through the global financial crisis, or at the Bank of England during uncertain times. My commitment has always been to economic stability and long-term prosperity." The quiet confidence in his voice commanded attention. "The climate crisis isn't a partisan issue, it's a mathematical one. The costs of inaction far exceed the costs of transition. That's not politics, it's accounting." Trump's expression darkened as Carney continued, "And regarding international cooperation, it's not a weakness, but a necessity in an interconnected global economy. No country, not even the United States, can isolate itself from climate impacts on supply chains, migration patterns, or financial stability." As Carney finished, a spontaneous applause broke out among many attendees. Trump leaned toward his microphone. "Nice speech, very nice. But while you're talking, American energy jobs are at stake. That's real, not some future model." The session ended with tension hanging in the air as participants filed out for the evening reception. Video clips of the exchange were already circulating worldwide. The confrontation had moved beyond economic theory into a clash of worldviews, and neither man was backing down. "Hey, before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you liked the video and subscribed to the channel yet? No? Then go ahead and click the subscribe button below. Oh, and tell me in the comments, what do you think so far, and where are you watching this from? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. Your support means a lot and really helps the channel grow and bring even more amazing content. I'm counting on you. Let's go." The morning of the summit's second day dawned gray and rainy over Toronto. Inside the Royal York's Grand Ballroom, technical staff made final adjustments to the live streaming equipment for what had become the most anticipated session of the E-Forum, a direct conversation between Mark Carney and President Trump on North American economic cooperation, moderated by CNN's Anderson Cooper. Online viewership had surged overnight. Financial publications were running special analyses. The hashtag Carney vs Trump was trending globally in his hotel suite. Carney reviewed briefing papers while his communications director updated him on the media narrative. They're framing it as a battle between populism and expertise, she explained. Most financial outlets are highlighting your data-driven approach while conservative media is amplifying the president's criticism of globalist bankers. Carney nodded, taking a sip of coffee. And what's the Canadian government's position? Officially neutral. Though the Prime Minister called to express support, he said, to remind you that you're still a Canadian even if the president suggests otherwise. A faint smile crossed Carney's face, noted. Meanwhile, President Trump was conducting a phone interview with a friendly morning show, doubling down on his criticism. These international banking elites, and Carney is definitely one of them, they've been pushing policies that hurt American workers for decades. Trump's voice boomed through the speakerphone in his suite. Today I'm going to set the record straight. When Trump ended the call, his chief economic advisor approached cautiously. Sir, our team has analyzed Carney's likely counter-arguments. He'll have data on U.S. job creation in renewable sectors that contradicts our fossil fuel focus. Trump waved dismissively. The people don't care about his charts, they care about their jobs, their energy bills. I know how to talk to real people, not just bankers. By 10 o'clock a.m. the ballroom was filled beyond capacity. Additional screens had been set up in overflow rooms. The live stream had already attracted over 100 viewers before the session even began. Anderson Cooper opened with a somber introduction, acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the direct confrontation between a former central banker and a sitting U.S. president. The economics of climate change have become one of the defining policy debates of our time, Cooper noted. Today, we have two of the most influential voices on either side of this discussion. The camera panned to show Carney and Trump seated across from each other, with Cooper between them. Carney in his characteristic navy suit, Trump in his signature red tie. Mr. President, you've suggested that climate-focused economic policies are job killers. Could you elaborate on this position? Cooper began. Trump leaned forward. Absolutely. These international climate agreements, they're designed to weaken American industry. When I pulled out of the Paris Accord, they said it would be a disaster. Instead, we had the strongest economy, the best employment numbers. He turned toward Carney. And experts like Mark here, they move around from country to country making decisions that affect ordinary workers, then move on before seeing the consequences. The personal attack came earlier than expected. Cooper turned to Carney. Would you like to respond to that characterization? Carney maintained his composure. Economics isn't abstract for me, Mr. President. I grew up in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, a small Canadian town where my father was the school principal. I've seen firsthand how policy decisions affect communities. He reached for a tablet on the table beside him. If I may, I'd like to address the jobs question directly. The large screen behind them displayed a chart showing employment trends in energy sectors across North America. The data shows that renewable energy jobs have grown at 3 times the rate of fossil fuel jobs over the past decade, Carney explained. These are high-paying, skilled positions that can't be outsourced. The transition isn't eliminating jobs, it's transforming them. Trump scoffed. More charts. Meanwhile, I talked to coal miners in Pennsylvania, oil workers in Texas. Real people are losing real jobs because of policies pushed by the climate crowd. Those workers deserve our support through this transition, Carney responded, but misleading them about the future of those industries does them no service. The exchange continued, growing increasingly heated as Cooper struggled to maintain the format. Viewership of the live stream had now passed 500 and was still climbing. Then came the moment that would dominate headlines for days. You know what I find interesting, Trump said, interrupting Carney's explanation of carbon pricing, is how someone who couldn't wait to leave Canada for a bigger job in England now presents himself as an expert on North American economics. He leaned forward, his voice taking on a harder edge. Let me be very clear, Mark. Carney represents everything wrong with the global elite. He moves from country to country, makes decisions that hurt working people, collects his paycheck, and moves on. No accountability. Meanwhile, I've built businesses that employ thousands of Americans. Cooper attempted to interject, but Trump continued. The American people elected me because they're tired of being lectured to by international bankers who've never had to meet a payroll or create a real job. The personal attack hung in the air. The live stream chat exploded with comments. Cooper turned to Carney, whose expression had remained impressively neutral throughout the tirade. Mr. Carney, how do you respond to these characterizations of your career? For several seconds, Carney was silent, gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, forcing Everyone to listen carefully, Mr. President. I've spent my career in public service because I believe in it. Central banking isn't about personal glory, it's about economic stability that benefits everyone, especially working families who suffer most. During crisis, his tone remained measured, but there was a new intensity in his eyes. You mention accountability. Every decision I made at both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England is documented, researched, and open to public scrutiny. The data on how Canada weathered the 2008 crisis is clear. The predictions I made about Brexit's economic impact have proven accurate. Carney leaned forward slightly. You say, I represent the global elite. My father was a teacher, my mother was a nurse. I worked my way through Harvard on scholarship. My commitment has always been to policies that create sustainable prosperity, not just quarterly profits or political polls. The room had fallen completely silent. Even Trump seemed momentarily taken back by Carney's quiet intensity. Public service means making difficult decisions based on data and long-term thinking, not what's politically expedient. Climate change isn't an opinion or a political position, it's a financial reality already affecting markets, supply chains, and insurance costs. Carney's voice remained steady as he delivered the response that would soon go viral. Leadership isn't about dividing people for political advantage. It's about facing difficult truths and finding solutions that work for everyone, not just for the next election, but for the next generation. The silence that followed was absolute. For perhaps the first time in his presidency, Trump seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The live-stream counter now showed over 1 million viewers witnessing the moment in real time. Cooper, recognizing the significance of the exchange, allowed the silence to linger before guiding the conversation back to policy specifics. But the dynamic had shifted. Carney's response, powerful in its restraint and substance rather than volume, had changed the tenor of the discussion. By the session's end, the clash had evolved from a shouting match into something more substantive, and in newsrooms around the world, editors were already crafting headlines about the banker who had silenced a president, not with bombast, but with dignified conviction. The rain had cleared by evening, leaving Toronto's skyline crisp against a darkening blue sky. Inside the Gardner Museum, where the summit's closing reception was being held, the atmosphere was electric, with hushed conversations and occasional glances toward Mark Carney, who stood near a display of contemporary Canadian ceramics, deep in conversation with the governor of the Bank of Japan. The video of Carney's response had accumulated over 20 million views in just hours. Dignity wins and generational leadership were trending worldwide. Financial markets, initially jittery at the public clash between a former central banker and a sitting U.S. president, had stabilized after analysts interpreted Carney's composed performance as a sign of institutional strength. President Trump had departed immediately after the session, citing pressing matters in Washington. His social media accounts unusually had remained silent for several hours, a fact not lost on political observers across the room. Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland approached Carney with 2 glasses of Canadian ice wine. I think you've earned this, she said, handing him one. Carney accepted with a small smile. Not my usual approach to economic discourse, no, she agreed, but sometimes the moment calls for something different. They were joined by Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff, who had been watching the live stream from Cambridge. That was masterful, Mark Rogoff said, though I suspect your life just got considerably more complicated. Carney raised an eyebrow. How so? Presidential animosity aside, you've just become the face of rational economic discourse. In a polarized time, everyone will want a piece of that. As if on cue, Carney's phone buzzed with notifications, interview requests from major networks, speaking invitations from universities, a message from the UN Secretary General about accelerating their climate finance initiative. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Trump sat in the Oval Office with his communications team, reviewing the media coverage. They're spinning it like he won, Trump said, gesturing at the muted CNN broadcast showing clips of the exchange. We need to get ahead of this narrative. His communications director looked uncomfortable. Sir, the polling data is unexpected. Even among our base, there's significant respect for how Carney handled himself. His points about his middle-class background and public service are resonating. Trump drummed his fingers on the desk, considering. Finally, he reached for his phone and began typing back. In Toronto, Carney was preparing to leave the reception when his assistant approached with a concerned expression. You'll want to see this, she said, holding out her phone. On the screen was Trump's latest tweet. Had a productive exchange with Mark Carney today. While we disagree on climate approach, his commitment to economic stability is commendable. Looking forward to continued dialogue on North American prosperity. Carney read it twice, then handed the phone back without comment. That's unexpected, his assistant said. It's strategic, Carney replied quietly. The confrontation wasn't working in his favor as they walked toward the exit. They passed a television showing financial news. The chyron at the bottom read, "Markets respond positively to Carney. Trump exchange. Canadian dollar strengthens." Outside, a small group of journalists waited. On the sidewalk, a reporter from the Globe and Mail stepped forward. "Mr. Carney, people are calling your response to President Trump a masterclass in leadership. Some are suggesting you should consider political office. Any comments?" Carney paused, considering his words carefully. Today wasn't about personalities, it was about the substance of economic policy that affects millions of lives. That's where our focus should remain. As his car arrived, another reporter called out, "Will you meet with President Trump if he requests it?" Carney turned back. "Of course, dialogue is essential, especially when we disagree. The challenges we face, climate change, economic inequality, technological disruption, they transcend borders and political differences. Finding common ground isn't just desirable, it's necessary." The next morning, Carney woke early in his Toronto hotel room. Through the window, he could see Lake Ontario again, now calm and reflecting the rising sun. His phone showed hundreds of messages and missed calls, but he set it aside and opened his laptop instead. The first item in his inbox was a confidential memo from the Prime Minister's office requesting an urgent meeting. The second was a formal invitation from the White House Economic Council. The third was a message from his former colleagues at the Financial Stability Board, asking him to lead a new initiative on climate risk. As he considered these developments, his wife Diana called from their home in Ottawa. "How are you holding up?" she asked, still processing. He admitted, "It wasn't how I expected the forum to go." "You spoke truth to power, Mark. Without shouting, without insults. People are hungry for that." After the call, Carney stood by the window watching the city come to life below. The confrontation with Trump had never been his intention, but sometimes leadership meant meeting the moment as it presented itself. His phone buzzed with a text from Tiff Mulham. "The PM is calling an emergency economic council meeting. Your presence requested." Carney typed back, "I'll be there." Whatever came next, whether continued conflict or unexpected collaboration, the conversation had been elevated in a world of sound bites and Twitter battles. Substance and dignity had for one revealing moment prevailed. As he packed his briefcase, a final news alert appeared on his phone. The headline read, "Carney affect climate finance stocks surge as market signals shift toward sustainable investment." Following viral exchange, it wasn't about winning an argument. Carney thought it was about changing the conversation, and perhaps, just perhaps, that had begun. All politics news related for you recently uploaded.